Welcome back. It's Chase, and today I want to look at Bryan Harsin's new contract. The details were just released, and so I want to take a little dive into those. But my main question is, how do those details in this contract compare to previous contracts of the likes of Gus Malzahn, Nick Saban, and Kirby Smart? Let's take a look at it. All right, first up, let's go ahead and take a look at Bryan Harsin's new contract. I want to show you some of the details up on the screen behind me. We're going to look at the pay per year. We're going to look at the years on the contract. For Harsin in particular, we're going to look at some of his the buyout that's required and some of the penalties he could incur if he were to get out of his contract early. Let's go ahead and take a look at these numbers for Bryan Harsin's pay per year. He's going to get about $5.25 million per year. He has 6 years on his contract initially, and that'll give him a total of $31.5 million. Now let's go ahead and look at some of these buyout issues. His buyout, if he's fired without cause. So this one, I'm going to compare this in a little bit to the contract extension that Gus got in 2017, because I know that particular contract got a lot of flack for the buyout part. But on Harsin's contract, it says that he will get 70% of his remaining contract. His penalty for leaving, keep this one in mind. We'll come back to this in a little bit. But his penalty for leaving early, within his first year, it's $7 million. Year 2, $5 million. Year 3, $3 million. Year 4, $2 million, and year 5, $1 million. Now let's look at how that compares to, I think the first one we'll look at is going to be Gus Malzahn's initial contract. Just so we can have some fair comparisons, I did go ahead and adjust for inflation on some of these numbers. So what I will show you, the first number where I adjusted for inflation is if you look at the pay per year average, the first number you see is going to be the actual amount that they got per year, and then the number that you see in parentheses, that's going to be the amount adjusted for inflation. So let's go ahead and look at Gus's initial contract in 2013 with Auburn. So this was his first contract after he worked a year at Arkansas State. This is what Auburn gave him out of the gate. Okay, so he has $2.3 million per year. He had 5 years on that initial contract, so you can see that he had 1 year less than what Harsin has, but Harsin has more coaching experience than Gus did when Gus first started. So let's go back to that $2.3 million. Adjusted for inflation, that is $2.59 million per year. The total pay over his contract was $11.5 million. If you want to see what that is adjusted for inflation, just do 2.59 million times 5. And his buyout fired without cause is $500,000 for each year remaining on the contract. So if he was fired after 1 year, he'd be owed $2 million, something like that. If you find that one, I found some different answers for, and I think it depended on when they saw the contract, but that seems to be the most accurate answer I found for his initial buyout before the contract extension in 2017. Looking down a little bit more, his penalty for leaving, it's the same, it was the same as his buyout. Same thing, $500,000 for each year remaining on his contract. So if he left after 1 year, he would have had to pay $2 million. Not too bad. Hey, before we look at this monstrosity of a contract that Gus had in 2017, go ahead and do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe if you've not already done so. Okay, this contract it's so bad. So bad for Auburn. Okay, so this was the contract he got after the 2017 season. His initial contract was about to run up. Arkansas was about to hire Gus out from under Auburn. Auburn panicked, in my opinion, and gave Gus this just absolutely killer contract that you see before you. So let's go ahead and look at this. We'll break it down and also look at the amount adjusted for inflation that you already see on your screen. So Pay per year, he had $7 million adjusted for inflation. That is $7.51 million per year. He had 7 years added to the contract, or I shouldn't say added. This made it where he had a 7-year contract. So he had a 7-year contract for $7 million per year, which got him to $49 million. Insane. But that's not the craziest part. The craziest part is the buyout, the fired without cause. So if we actually look at that, it says he would get 75% of his entire contract. Or let me rephrase that. 75% of his entire contract was guaranteed. So if he got fired after 1 year, 75% of that contract that's left, he's going to get it. Okay, that's not completely right. 75% of his total contract, he's getting no matter what. So whatever's left of that 75% that he's not been paid, that is what he would get. That's how we ended up with a $21 million buyout for Gus. That's why we owe so much money. It was this contract. And you're going to notice the penalty for leaving for Gus, which Gus didn't leave, so this didn't apply. But this is the exact same penalty for leaving that Bryan Harsin has. So that same deal. After 1 year, it's $7 million. Year 2, 5, and so on. The exact same penalty that Bryan Harsin would get if he were to leave early. But the biggest drawback to this Gus Malzahn contract is sitting right there at the buyout fired without cause. That's 75% of the entire contract being guaranteed. That was just a killer, and we already saw we're still paying for it. So I think Auburn learned their lesson on that, and the buyout is different with Harsin. And so I'm hoping going forward we won't ever do a contract like that again. For Saban and Kirby Smart, I'm not as concerned with their buyouts or their penalties for leaving. So we're just going to look at their pay per year and the total contract, total amount for their contract, and the years they had on that initial contract. First, let's look at Saban's contract that he got in 2007. So if you look behind me over here, he was getting, which this was an earth-shattering amount of money at the time when it happened. It really changed the trajectory for coaching contracts when Saban got this deal with Alabama in 2007. So this was a huge deal, and it really changed the game for everyone. So at the time, he got a deal worth $32 million. It was $4 million per year on an 8-year contract, which was completely unheard of at the time. If you adjust that for inflation, he would have been making $5.07 million. Obviously, he's making a lot more now, but at the time, this was a huge contract. Even though adjusted for inflation, it doesn't look as much, and it's really comparable to what Harsin is making now. At the time, this was just something completely different than what we were seeing in the rest of college football. For Kirby Smart, we're going to look at his 2015 initial contract with Georgia. You can see that he was making $3.75 million per year. Adjusted for inflation, that is $4.16 million. He initially got a 6-year contract, just like Harsin received this week, and his total pay over the contract period was $22.5 million. So you can see kind of where these stand. I'm about to show you the whole chart on the screen. I'm going to put my camera away so you don't see me, and I'm just going to put this whole spreadsheet over the screen. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at all these numbers compared to each other at one time. You can see that based on these numbers, Harsin's getting a pretty decent deal, at least comparing to these other coaches in these other times and adjusted for inflation. It's really comparable to what Saban got in 2007. It's not, maybe I shouldn't say that, it's a little unfair. It's comparable money-wise, but the game has changed. So really, I think the fair way to compare it at this point is to look at where current SEC coaches are. So let's look at a breakdown of just the salary. I'm not doing a deep dive into the numbers like I just did for these other coaches. And really, Gus is the one we want to look at because that was comparing Auburn to Auburn. And Harsin is getting a much better deal than Gus's initial contract, but not nearly as good of a deal as Gus got with his extension. So let's go ahead and just look at a breakdown of where Harsin's contract compares to other SEC coaches who are currently in the league. Before I show you this spreadsheet that has how much every coach in the SEC is making, I did want to explain part of it to you. So I'm including the coaches that were fired, but I'm not necessarily including the replacements. So I have Gus on here where he would have ranked. Obviously, I have Bryan Harsin added, but I also have some of the fired coaches like Pruitt, Muschamp, and Mason. All right, if you look at this chart with me, the number one spot is not going to surprise you at all. Obviously, Nick Saban's at the top. He's making $9.1 million per year. The next couple may surprise you a little bit. Coach O comes in at number 2 at 8.7, but keep in mind he just won a national championship not too long ago. Jimbo Fisher, $7.5 million per year, so he's number 3. And Gus, before he was fired, would have been the 4th highest paid coach in the SEC at $6.9 million per year, just above Kirby Smart at 6.8. Dan Mullen at Florida, $6.1 million, and then right after that is where Bryan Harsin would fall, which makes him the 6th highest paid coach in the SEC. So that's pretty good for him just coming in. I think we had to pay him this amount just to remain competitive. If you look, somebody in the comments on either I can't remember if it was one of my videos or it may have been a Facebook post, but somebody commented that we had to pay this amount to get someone decent in the SEC because that's just what you pay in the SEC. And looking at this chart, I agree with that. The fact that someone coming to Auburn is barely making more than the coaches at Kentucky and Mississippi State, I tend to think we're not paying too much. It feels like a lot of money because it is a lot of money, but when you compare it to these other guys and what they're making, he's really not getting paid too much compared to the other coaches. It's fair. He's new to the SEC. He's got to prove himself. So it seems like a fair pay, a fair contract compared to these other guys. And then towards the bottom, I skip past these guys that are fired, but they're on this chart if you want to see them. But you've got Pittman at 3 and Kiffin at 3.9. But the main thing I wanted to look at is where did Harsin fall ultimately with his contract, and it's kind of it's just right in the middle. And as a new guy to the SEC, yes, he has proven himself in at Boise State, but he's yet to do that at in the SEC because he just started. The last thing I want to show you, I posted a poll in 2 different Facebook groups, and they were a little bit different. So I posted one in All About Auburn, and I'll show you that one first. I gave 3 options, and the question was, what do you think about Bryan Harsin's new contract? I'll show you that one first, and then I also posted one in the War Eagle room, and with that one, I took some advice or some feedback, I should say. I took some feedback I got on the first poll. I made some adjustments to add some additional choices, and I'll show you that one as well and what those results look like and how these polls compare to each other. And this is what you guys think. So I want to see what you guys think about this contract. Let's go ahead and look at it. The first poll I put on All About Auburn. I said, what do you think about Harsin's contract, 6-year deal, worth roughly $5.25 million a year? The top answer with 34 votes was time will tell if this was a good deal. And the second answer was worth it. These are people who are more 100% sure they liked the contract and the hire and all that. And that had 18 votes. Now let's look at the one from War Eagle Room. From the poll I did in this group, same question, but some different answer choices. We had 43 votes went to time will tell if this was a good deal. 16 votes went to 100% worth it, no question. 6 votes, this is what you have to pay in the SEC to get a decent coach. 2 for, 2 for maybe Gus wasn't so bad, and 1 worth it to get rid of Gus. So really, if you look between those 2 polls, it really seems like most people are just kind of in a wait and see mode. They want to see what Bryan Harsin does this season. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of money, but I'm hoping, and when I did this poll, you did not necessarily have this perspective, but now that I've provided this perspective and you see that the pay is really comparable to Mississippi State or Kentucky, does that change your mind? That's the question I'm going to leave you with. If you did answer time will tell if this was a good deal in either one of these polls, does that change your mind knowing that his pay is really comparable to the coaches at Mississippi State and Kentucky? This was a little bit of a different video, but these are different times, and it's off season, so different stuff is going on. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe if you've not already done so. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.